welcome you all to this rather special event. I'd like to welcome in particular Kathy, Angela and John Shaw's daughter, and Dave, who, talking over lunch, has known John and played music with John since 1967. So I'm hoping that he'll tell us all a little bit more about John's music and all the things that he was involved in.
Scandal.
Absolutely not. I've got any work involved.
Can I first of all,
grab that?
Crispian is here, and what's happened is, I think it was at least a year ago, Crispian wrote to us, he wrote to me as a Halsway representative for the club, to ask if we would like to sponsor a bench, pay for the fabulous new benches outside. And I said, well, I'm sure they'd love to do that, let's ask them. And then I thought, well, we should dedicate it to John, because we had just lost John. We had had a lovely online event and played music for him. And I think everybody, there was just 2 seconds, yes, let's do that. We'll dedicate this bench to John. So that's what I'm thinking about on behalf of the club.
Yeah, well, welcome everybody. I'm sure plenty of you have been here before. My name is Crispian, I'm the Chief Executive here. And yeah, thank you for the bench. What's lovely about it is I was going to replace a lot of the benches. You might have seen it here over the years that were probably dating back to the 1960s, made of wood and falling apart a bit. The great thing about these things is they're made of recycled plastic. They'll be here for 40,000 years. so that's brilliant. So thank you very much. And like everybody's had a chance to sit in them because they're very comfortable. Yeah. John's bench is out right outside the front door. So I hope you have a lovely rest of your week, and let us know if anything you need. Nothing's any trouble. Well, a few things, but. Thank you.
Can we just say thank you for all the photocopy as well?
No problem.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to
hand back to John.
So, can I just then ask Geoff to maybe say a few words on behalf of the club, if you'd like?
Sorry, it's just straight there. Hi everybody, just to say, well, a little reminiscence first. Going back the heady days of 2000 sometime, I was privileged to meet John for the first time with John Crocker, who were both on a mission from the Non-Such Dulcimer Club to sell their respective hammered dulcimers and mountain dulcimer instruments. What a pair to come across! Yes. and well, clearly they did a reasonable job. You might not think so on my part, because I was hooked with the mountain dulcimer after that. And I discovered very soon that John was very learned. You know, he was an academic, basically, at heart. And he loved his sources, and he loved his, where the words came from, where the music came from, and made sure it was very accurate. But much more important, he wasn't just learning, but he was wise. And there's a difference between the two, clearly. Being academically dry and dusty, and John was never that. John was a very wise and balanced man. More importantly, from my point of view, he was also a beautiful player of the mountain dulcimer, with kind of an English-developed style. Definitely not American, so, not sort of flat-picked, but he loved his American tunes. He researched and had whole walls full of American CDs and tapes and things, including the most obscure stuff I've ever come across. But he was a beautiful player of the mountain dulcimer. Fluent, melodic, with an unusual style, which you didn't really want to copy unless you wanted to hurt your wrist. But it worked for John, and I would regard him, and I think a lot of other mountain dulcimer players who came at about the same time as me would regard him as a very important mentor in terms of dulcimer playing. What was lovely was that everything was so effortless with John, and that's always the sign of an excellent player, isn't it? This glide up and down the fingerboard is seamless. He put no time into it. But he played, of course, and he practiced, and he did all sorts of things you could hope. And for us, yes, we had an American repertoire, so from my point of view, I was introduced to all this American music from John. English folk was particularly his thing, but also Eastern European music. So we got a lot of klezmer music. Hungary, I think, was his particular favourite, but a lot of Eastern European Balkan music, things of that kind. And I seem to remember there was one course that was too hard even for the hammered dulcimer players, I would say, where every piece was either in 5/4 or 7/8 or something like that. Of course, John made it effortless, but we all struggle in his wake. So, I mean, just a little personal reminiscence, perhaps before we move on, and David says a bit more about him. I used to visit John, we used to play together, and I always learned a lot from that. John also used to turn up every now and again with his 8-track recorder. I think he had 2, just in case the other one failed. So he always came with his 8-track recorder, and he would play something and then asked me to play along the side something, and I discovered, much to my surprise, that I was actually on one. There was a duet on there, and I thought, oh, that's nice, I remember playing that duet. I wonder who the other player was. Lo and behold, the other player was me, so that made it onto the CD.
And you never got paid?
Oh, no. But the more important thing, he was always very generous with his time, very generous with his encouragement, and genuinely a hugely important figure, certainly in the mountain dulcimer world, and wider in the dulcimer world, because he was president, he was chair, sorry, not such several times, was he? So, couldn't be a better tribute than to have the chair outside, for us just to sit in, hopefully in the sunshine this week, relax, and contemplate things, and just think of John, and think of music, and think of the dulcimer. What more?
Sounds good.
Anyway, David.
Yeah. Well, follow that. John had much more Catholic music taste than any of you would have realised. His first love was rock and roll.
Yes.
Buddy Holly in particular was his favourite rock and roll musician, although he loved all of them. And when he was at Oxford University, where he got a double first, by the way, when he was at university, he got into folk music there in the famous University Folk Club. And I met him just after he came back from university, and I was just finishing a university course in Bristol in a pub on the dockside. And we shared our love of traditional music. John at that stage wasn't involved with dulcimer at all, but he got very interested in what was known as electric folk at the time. People like Steel Ice Band and so on, who were just emerging. The idea of using modern instruments to take old tunes and do something different with them, and that was something that always interested John, doing something different with old material. So we formed a band called Ella Campaign, which developed eventually into a folk theatre band, and John drifted away, went too far down that way, and did something else. I remember him coming along to a practice, would have been about 73, perhaps, with a plank, a piece of wood, a plank with some strings on it, and a humbucker pickup underneath, 3 strings, and it was his first dulcimer. It was an electric dulcimer, and he wanted to use it in the band as part of this, trying different things out. And Angela, his wife, who sadly can't be with us today because she's not at all well, actually played it, and initially, because John played the bass guitar. Anyway, the band went on for several years. He developed an interest during the band in Punch and Judy, and was an extremely good Punch and Judy man. Yes, I actually have a video of him doing a Punch and Judy show at my son's 6th birthday party. So that's going to be something for posterity. The whole show. And that, of course, was different. That was different from everyone else. Well, at the end it was, anyway. He managed to introduce the Queen into it, didn't he? But anyway, yes, he then got involved in dulcimer, started playing the dulcimer regularly and using it in the band and for accompaniment, and drifted off and started playing with other dulcimer players at that stage, although he kept all his other things going. He then developed. He then joined a group which was three-part harmony singing. Later on, he became involved in early church music with a group called To Be Saints, and they did what's known as West Gallery music, which was the kind of music that was played in Anglican churches before the organ came in and swept it all away. You know, Thomas Hardy under the Greenwood tree and all that. Yeah, so he got involved in that. And in the mid-90s, we set up a little group. We started doing some Christmas carols. We wanted to do English Christmas carols that were not the usual ones that you hear all the time. Because there's a huge, rich tradition in Britain as a whole of Christmas carols, villages writing their own Christmas carols, singing them in places like Cheddar, not too far away from here, for instance. So we started off doing a sort of Christmas thing, and we enjoyed it so much, we started doing other seasons, so we did May, and we did Harvest, and that kind of thing. And then we developed an interest. The group was called the Hot Welsh Howlers. The reason it was called that was because we rehearsed in a pub that you all know well, called the Nova Scotia, which has always been, like this place, the basis of folk song, still is. Wonderfully helpful landlord there, who, you know, just goes along with the flow of it, doesn't charge anyone anything, use his room. We got involved in that, and John also, so it's called the Hot Welsh Howlers, and that went for 25 years we were running. And John was still active in that until the end. And in fact, we've got a new CD coming out very shortly that John features quite heavily on. But in addition to that, to the church music, to the Hot Welsh Howlers, to Non-Such, the Mountain Dulcimer Club, he was also very involved in research and research particularly local songs. And we came down here for a weekend in about 10 years ago and did a weekend about the Quantock songs, the songs reflected in the Quantock, and made a CD on the basis of that. So he was, a tremendously wide interest he had. My last memory of John was during the lockdown, which sadly sort of finished things off for so many of us. And our little group decided that every Sunday morning when we usually practice, that we would have a Zoom session together. We'd sing a song to each other to keep, just keep ourselves going. We couldn't join in together, but we sang separately. And the last song that I remember John singing was a song called John Collins. Something Collins.
Collins.
With the American Dolls. It's an American song, and it features the chorus, and the angels took him away. Laid him 6 feet under the clay. The angels took him away. I can't remember the name of it. Somebody Collins. So that was my last memory of John singing and playing was him singing that song. Sadly, well, as you know, he passed away 2 years ago. Wonderful, wonderful man. Just such a lovely man as well. Just such a good friend, always there to offer sensible advice and,
Yes. Well, we're going to try and see if we can, we shall keep John's memory alive in all sorts of ways. Seeds out there, but also playing.
He has a strong musical legacy, by the way. There are several CDs he made himself. There's one other thing I should have mentioned, that he had a long association with a chap called Alan, and they did a huge range of modern material, some of Alan's own songs, and stuff they played together in a modern style as well, so I forgot to mention Alan. Yeah.
Should say there is a Halsey link, just very quickly. The William Winter manuscript, which was discovered and then placed in the library here and then transcribed about 10 years ago.
Yeah, about 10 years ago.
John has done his own Dulcimer versions of a lot of those. And they're lovely tunes, not tunes that are found elsewhere so often. So if anybody's interested, we can certainly have a go at playing a few of those. I have a whole lot of transcriptions which I have yet to distribute, which we discovered. So, thank you very much both for coming. We're going to try and see if we can just keep John's memory alive in the way that he would particularly like us to do, I'm sure, which is playing some of the songs he introduced. do it again.